Good morning and welcome to the April 2nd, 2024 Strategic Planning Committee meeting. This morning's presentation is going to focus on taking a deeper dive into how we build strong and supportive schools. Before I go a little further, though, I'm going to ask my fellow board members to introduce themselves.
Absolutely. Good morning. Shebra Evans, representing District 4. Good to see everyone. Happy spring.
Ms. Harris?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Lynn Harris, at-large member of the board. Happy spring.
And I'm Brenda Wolf, Chair, District 5. I'm also going to ask our board staff to introduce themselves, and after that, MCPS staff that's here today to introduce themselves.
Good morning, Lori Christina Webb, Chief of Staff for the board.
Good morning, Shannon Pattyfoot, Senior Analyst to the board.
Good morning, James Lipinski, Communications Support Specialist.
Go ahead.
And for us, I'm Stephanie Sharon. Good morning, Chief of Strategic Initiatives to my left.
Good morning, Margie Lopmotsatsos, and I'm the Director of District-Wide Professional Learning.
Good morning, Shauna K. Jarambi, Director of Student Engagement and Behavioral Health.
Good morning, Steve Neff, Director of Pupil Personnel and Attendance Services.
Good morning, Kevin Yates, Principal, Damascus High School.
Probably would have been made more sense to have you introduce yourselves as you speak so that people could remember, but do it again when you're on, okay? So as I said, today we're going to take a deeper dive into how we build strong and supportive school climates through professional learning, restorative practices, and student attendance initiatives. These three approaches are critical levers in proactively creating positive climates in our schools. We know that in order to create optimal environments for students to learn, we must proactively support their well-being. Therefore, positive climates directly correlate with better student academic performance. Over the next few weeks in our full board meetings, we will hear from our school leaders about many different initiatives that all tie back to building and supporting stronger and safer school climates. In April, the Office of System-Wide Safety and Emergency Management will share key updates. In May, you will hear from the Office of School Support and Wellbeing about mental health and wellness and about suspensions. Therefore, today's focus is better understood about how we build strong climates through a focus on engagement. I'm now going to turn this over to Stephanie Sharon. You'll notice that I said that correctly this time. She doesn't like the French pronunciation. But go ahead, Ms. Sharon.
I do not mind the French pronunciation at all, Ms. Wolf. But thank you and good morning, everybody. And as Ms. Wolf said, today the team is really doing a deeper dive on what are the proactive factors that really lead to positive school climates. One of the other meetings that is going to be happening at the full board at the end of May is on May 23rd, we're going to be bringing to the board the results from our district-wide climate survey. So that will be another wave that we will be able to see how are the strategies that we're implementing actually having an impact in our community.
Before you go any further, I forgot to ask, does anyone have any questions about the informational summary from the last meeting? No. Lynn? All right, thank you. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So today we're really going to be thinking about how we're engaging our students and what that looks like. So without any further ado, I am going to turn it over to Ms. Shauna K. Jarambi. Please bring the slide deck up.
Next slide, please. And one more. All right, good morning, everyone. As indicated by Ms. Wolf, once again, we'll introduce ourselves. I'm Shauna K. Jarambi. I'm the Director of Student Engagement, Behavioral Health, and Academics. Thank you. Before we go into updates and discussions around the work, we want to frame a little bit our understanding of the importance of school climate. So positive school climates create environments where students thrive academically, socially, and emotionally. By fostering safety, respect, and support, these climates lead to improved academic student outcomes, but also reduced disciplinary incidents and enhanced well-being for students and, something we sometimes forget, teachers too. Investing in positive school climates means investing in the success and the happiness of the entire school community. Next slide, please. So I'm sharing with you today how we build, or one way that we build, strong climates. So this is from the United States Department of Education, and it defines school climate as the quality and character of school life. So it totals all of the range of several factors, and these are influenced by engagement, safety, and environment. And under those categories, engagement includes factors such as cultural competence. It includes relationships within the building and also school participation. And we're not going to talk about safety and environment today, as Ms. Wolf framed and Ms. Sharon framed. Some of those other topics are coming on later. We're going to focus today on engagement. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to talk about engagement, these three categories, under three different lenses. So we're going to hear a little bit about system-wide professional development as it relates to cultural and linguistic competence. We're going to hear about some of the work with restorative approaches as it relates to building relationships between students and staff. And we're going to hear about student attendance as it relates to school participation, which is in the same domain. Next slide, please. I'll now turn it over to Dr. Marjorie Lope-Mustazos.
Thank you, Shauna Kate. And I am the Director of District-Wide Professional Learning. So I want to make the connection here with what Shauna Kay said and what USDE emphasizes, and the importance of school climate and engagement. I'm excited to introduce to you today the Equitable Teaching and Learning Framework. We're going to watch a short video here that introduces this framework that was developed by a cross-offices team, stakeholder involvement, and it really talks about what MCPS says is where we need to focus on equitable teaching and learning in our schools. And one of the core components, there are 5 core components you're going to hear about today. One of the core components is school and classroom environment. And that's the big foundational piece of the big professional learning I'm going to talk about, and then Shauna Kay is going to get into some of the more specific, and then you'll hear from Kevin on exactly in a school level what it looks like. So let's start with our short video that gives an overview of this framework.
Following the adverse and disparate effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, MCPS leadership identified 3 priority areas for our school system: building and rebuilding trust, school and workplace wellness, and equitable teaching and learning. Through the lens of these priorities, the MCPS Offices of Strategic Initiatives, Chief Academic Officer, and School Support and Wellbeing shifted their aim from mitigating learning disruptions to providing equitable teaching and learning, especially for historically marginalized students. As we strive for an anti-racist system, MCPS must be coherent and accountable in our work, build relational trust, consistently collect and act on data, and provide equity-centered capacity building for staff. These points were cited in the recent anti-racist audit as cross-domain recommendations for our district. The new Equitable Teaching and Learning Framework, or ETLF, is a research-informed guide created to define exactly what equitable teaching and learning is. This framework aligns with the MCPS strategic plan and aims to address the findings of the anti-racist audit. The Equitable Teaching and Learning Framework incorporates elements of the MCPS Professional Growth System Standards, the new MCPS Professional Learning Standards, and Unbound Ed's GLEAM framework, which supports instruction that is grade level, engaging, affirming, and meaningful.
Give me an example of cultural diffusion. Anyone can give me an example of that?
Creating equitable learning environments requires a shared understanding of and commitment to core values and goals by every member of our school system. With that in mind, the ETLF is organized into 3 levels. Core components, the 5 essential areas of focus that, with fidelity of practice, will ensure we provide equitable teaching and learning for every learner. Curriculum instruction, learning and assessment, school and classroom environment, professional learning, community engagement, and system-wide supports. Each core component is composed of commitments that detail what our school system's anti-racist values and transformative learning goals look like in practice, and conditions that make clear the specific culture and beliefs that must be in place to achieve each commitment. This framework will guide professional learning for school leader teams as they coach educators to achieve the conditions outlined in Component 1 of the framework: curriculum, instruction, learning, and assessment. In addition, district-wide professional learning days will focus on implementing the conditions articulated in Component 2, school and classroom environment. Building on our previous 27 research-informed equitable classroom practices, a digital platform will feature implementation examples of the framework in the form of video vignettes. Here, MCPS educators will reflect on how they shifted their beliefs and practices to embody elements of the framework in their daily practice. The platform will also feature a comment area for discussion and sharing.
And to the republic for which it stands,
MCPS is committed to transforming teaching and learning experiences and learning outcomes, especially for historically marginalized students. The ETLF articulates a coherent set of understandings about teaching and learning grounded in equity and anti-racism. This framework is intended to be a guide for transforming learning experiences and improving outcomes for every student, every day.
So we've been using this framework as the foundation for all the professional learning that we've done for the entire school year. We launched it district-wide in the district-wide day back in October with all of the teachers, and been using it and with the leader, everything from leader learning through to the teacher learning for the entirety of the year. Next slide, please.
Can I ask a question real quick, just to kind of stick with that? So how do we measure that beliefs have been shifted? How do you know?
We're going to get to that.
Okay.
Right here, exactly.
Some data in a second.
Because that's exact. So, and I want to set this up. This is a slide I want to set it up for. This is how we think about the professional learning. So you see that blue circle. It says standards for professional learning, and you can also think of the equitable teaching and learning framework there, because that's our foundation. Then we provide in the purple there high quality professional learning for educators. We know that it can. Our aim is that it does what's in the green, right? That it changes their knowledge, skills, and beliefs, and or it changes their practice. It could do either or, it could do both. It's not linear. Sometimes it changes their practice, which changes their beliefs, or sometimes it changes their beliefs, and then in turn, that makes them do something different in the classroom. And all of that leads to improvements in outcomes for the students. Sometimes we jump right to what was the impact on the students. First, we have to see, did we impact the knowledge, beliefs, skills, or did we have them change their practice so that we can see the change in student achievement? And I want to show you some of our initial data that we have on how we've seen some shifts in practices. Next slide, please. So I want to start out with the teachers. So we introduced this framework with teachers in October, as I mentioned, and we focus specifically on core component number 2, the school and classroom environment. That's where we did our work, and we're coming back to that again for the April 22nd district-wide day. And what we saw there is that 91%, over 10,000 respondents, agreed or strongly agreed that the content which was focused on school and classroom environment and thinking about those specific conditions and practices you do differently was relevant and meaningful. What we'll collect in April will be what specific actions do they take and how did it change, the student achievement or student practice in the classroom. So that's the first piece I wanted to share about impact.
Is that going to be through a survey? How are you going to collect that data, I guess is what I want to know.
Yeah, the staff development teachers are going to all collect that data. Everybody has to complete a form at the end of the professional learning that's happening on April 22nd. They have specific strategies they're going to be introduced to, and then they have to say which one did they do, and then what happened.
Is it a requirement that everybody fills it out?
Exactly.
So that we get the feedback from everyone?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So we're just talking about what's happening in the planning stages. And so it's being implemented, correct? Mm-hmm. Right, but we're in the beginning stages of implementation.
Right.
So you'll get, okay.
So first we introduced it, and now they've been using it. They're coming back to it. We introduced it in October. They've been using it. It's been aligned to all the professional learning with the school leaders are taking it back and using it. And now we're coming back to it in April. Okay, so what strategies did you do, and what did it change?
Okay.
But you really won't be able to measure effectiveness this quickly. You'll just be able to measure what they're doing.
And then we'll be able to see what adjustments do we need to make, how did it go, to see effectiveness.
How do you ensure fidelity in whatever it is they're doing? I mean, I'm not hearing that.
Right. So for the professional learning, we also have to have observation. We have to have observations of that feedback. We have to see if what we taught them, they're implementing it the way we taught, or did it change? So observations, we have to have their feedback on it. It takes a little while to figure all of that out, and it takes multiple feedback loops.
Okay, so then the principals in each school will take the data they get back, look at what was stated or shared by their teachers, and then go back and observe if they see what they actually wrote. And then you can determine, you just say, I'm repeating what you said, but I didn't get all that in that way.
So then, did they implement it the way we intended it so it could have the positive impact? We have to see that. We have to also see, then did it have an impact on student achievement as it was intended? Do we start to see some change in student achievement?
So then we won't actually know until this time next year, actually, because you're going to take the data that you see, they're really going to be able to put it into practice next school year. They've probably been doing it a little bit, but based on you not getting it till October to hear what they're saying, the observations, are they going to all happen before the end of the school year in order to see where there needs to be some changes?
Yes.
Really this time next year, we should really know?
We should really know some more significant impact then, definitely. People are doing observations now, and I think they have been doing observations, so it's an ongoing cycle, right?
That's what I was getting ready to ask you, because I thought you said you weren't going to start the observations until after the April 22nd training, and that wasn't working for me in my mind. Lynn, I see you on the screen. Did you have a question?
Yes, I did. And I think it's just building on what you and Ms. Evans have been asking. I'm trying to envision. So we did a system-wide professional development day in the fall, and we're doing another one coming up on April 22nd. They're both focused on equitable teaching and learning frameworks and looking at how we are shifting sort of, attitudes, beliefs, knowledge, and practices in the classroom to improve outcomes for students. This is all great work. But I really am trying to figure out how we're operationalizing this in every school. I mean, we have 14,000 teachers participating in these trainings, and you're having them do, I think this is what I heard, after they participate in the day-long training, they're filling out a reflection form. They're giving you feedback about that experience. And then you are taking that feedback and you are then somehow operationalizing people in schools to observe those teachers to see if the feedback they provided and the strategies they identified as impactful to them are actually being used in the classrooms.
So let me provide a little bit of clarity that might be helpful. Okay, so the focus for the Equitable Teaching and Learning Framework this year for the district-wide professional learning was on focusing on the classroom environment, right? How do you create the conditions, right? That has been the focus. But this is not brand new, earth-shattering, this is the first time teachers have ever heard of this work. Standard 3 in the teacher professional growth system is about how teachers set the classroom environment. The purpose of the Equitable Teaching and Learning Framework is to ensure that we're creating a little bit more coherence and putting that anti-racist lens on what this looks like. So we've always expected our teachers to create classroom environments that were positive for school culture and climate. However, what we have noticed, as we learned in our anti-racist audit, is a lack of consistency and coherence with this. So you want to think of this as a waterfall approach. One and done trainings are not where you're going to get the most bang for your buck, right? That's not where you're going to see effective change. But the purpose of doing the district-wide professional learning is to create that common understanding approach. While that's been happening on the district-wide professional learning days, the principals and leaders, including the staff development teachers, the leadership teams, what they've been working on with the resource teachers and the curriculum office across the board, have all been receiving in-depth training on what this looks like and how to operationalize it in their buildings. This is one leg of that. So concurrently with the district-wide days, for instance, we have principals, staff development teachers, and entire leadership teams having more in-depth training that they have been having throughout the entire year to be able to then work on integrating this into their school improvement plans works. When they're doing formal observations, the Equitable Teaching and Learning Framework directly aligns with the teacher PGS. It is not in conflict. So the expectations are aligned in what they're doing. How we're utilizing the data specifically with the district-wide work, because remember, when you're evaluating professional learning, it is not just taking a look at student outcomes. And oftentimes you have to look at multiple different layers of evaluation to determine its efficacy and impact. So when you're taking a look at the district-wide learning, this is really helping us inform on a very high level scale, okay, where is our district performing? But then there's also evaluations happening on the ground level with the schools, with the leader learning that's happening, in the other different professional learning that's happening in alignment with this framework to figure out how we're adjusting and informing what we're doing on the district level.
I guess this is where I'm having my difficulty, and you jump in here anytime. Standard 3 is not new. No. This is what we've been talking about for years. This sounds like the same discussion we had last year and the year before, and we haven't changed anybody's hearts and minds, maybe some. But I'm not seeing the effectiveness piece come out of it. I'm not hearing anything different that's going to lead to the effectiveness piece, because the standard it's really already been there. We've been asking for this. You all have been asking for this as leaders. But what is really going to be different? That's what I'm not actually hearing. I mean, I heard the new acronym for it. I guess we'll have to add that to the acronym book. But I'm not understanding. And I guess if I'm not understanding, I'm not sure how the people out there are going to understand what's really different, because this standard was always there.
The standard was always there, definitely. I think one of the things that's different is the alignment and the coherence around everybody working from the exact same page, learning very specific strategies and conditions that we're all working towards in a very the same language, the same, the principals are getting it, they're building their understanding. The staff development teachers are getting it, they're building, they have the understanding. So we're all talking from the same song sheet, and we're all coming back to it in very specific feedback loops. If we can go back to the slides a second, I can just show you some data, what we learned from the school leader learning that has helped us inform this, and I think will be an example of what I'm saying.
Can I just ask you before you go back to that slide, because I thought I wrote down where you said coherent set of standards for teaching and learning, but what does that mean? I mean, I thought we wanted to differentiate depending upon what the child needed. What that sounds like to me, and I'm not a classroom educator, so you're going to have to break it down. That sounds like you want everybody doing the same thing.
So yes, let me come back at that. So differentiation would be an example of a commitment, and we specify, so what does that differentiation actually look like in a classroom? How do you do that? That would be a commitment. What we're standardizing is, these are the conditions that you must set for students in the classroom. You must, when we think about school and classroom environment, these are the very specific, like, you have to make students feel welcome. And then the commitment is, how do you do that? How do you differentiate to make students feel welcome? So we have these big, huge core competencies, and then we get into these very specific commitments. The core competencies, that's what we want to be standard and aligned for everyone.
I understand that. Now, can you tell me what those competencies are? Is it just a few, or if it's 100?
No, there are 5. So it's the big core competencies are school and classroom environment, which is the one we're focusing on here today. And then we have instruction, curriculum, and assessment. The third one is professional learning. The fourth one is community engagement, and the fifth one is system-wide supports. So we're saying we need all of these big core competencies to work together to be able to provide an equitable teaching and learning experience for every student.
Lynn, did you have something? Lynn, you got I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Well, and I do appreciate this discussion and getting kind of deeper so we can really conceptualize what we're doing. And so first question, so these 2 system-wide professional development days, the one in the fall, the one coming up on April 22nd, those are in-person days. So the teachers, they report to their schools and they all participate in person together. Is that correct?
They did for the first one. For the second one, it is an asynchronous. They have the option of being in school, or they can do it. They can telework for this second one that starts on the day of Passover. So there is some flexibility, but there is alignment with what they're doing in their schools before it and after it. So, for example, they're learning, they've been working on the strategies, and they're identifying the strategy that they're going to be working on that April 22nd day. And then in a follow-up professional learning with their staff development teachers in their school, in the regular flow of professional learning that happens in their school, that's when they're reporting out. They're going to try that strategy and report out, how did it go for me? And what did I learn, and what will I do differently? And then we have a system to collect that data centrally, but then the school will use that data too.
So one of the things I was just going to jump in, and I know it's hard to conceptualize all of this and how it plays out in the school. This is one of the reasons that we brought Mr. Yates today from Damascus, was to show and really provide, and I think when we were rehearsing for the presentation, I think he did a fantastic job of bringing together how professional learning, our restorative approaches, and our student attendance, how those proactively all support and impact the school community. So I did want to just put a plug in for when we get to Mr. Yates, who I think will help tie this together a little bit more on the school level.
And I appreciate that. And I just want to kind of one final observation before we move on. For me, we've had, since we started the anti-racist system audit 2 years ago, and then we moved through doing the audit, looking at its findings, and then setting up the teams and throughout the community to come up with the action plan. We've had multiple presentations about those steps and how things were moving. And I think one of the things that I have commented on, and I'm going to be really listening closely here today as we move forward, is in a system of 25,000 human beings who bring with them all kinds of talents and all kinds of abilities and skills and experiences, which is amazing. But they also bring with them every form of bigotry, bias you can imagine, because that's the nature of human beings. And so when we talk about changing beliefs, because we know, we knew before, and our anti-racist system audit confirmed that we have employees in our system who treat others, fellow staff members, students, families, through a lens of their bigotry. And people experience that. And we've been doing some really in-depth work lately on looking specifically at different forms of hate bias and what we are going to do to combat them in the system. But part of that is, how do you address a workforce of our size, which is very large, when some of what you need to do is the very difficult work of changing what people believe about other human beings. So I'm going to be listening very closely to how we are actually going about trying to change those belief systems which have negatively impacted other people in our school communities, and how we're monitoring and assessing and evaluating that, because that's key. If we're going to be an anti-bias system, it starts with how people inside the system treat each other.
And I think you bring up a good point, Lynn, but I'm going to be quite frank when I say changing someone's belief system is relatively out of our control. We can provide education. We can provide that's really, and I know we mentioned changing beliefs and what Dr. Lope Musasso said, but at the end of the day, we're in the business of making sure that they know what the expectations are for their behavior. So the beauty of this framework is that it provides, this is specifically what this looks like to demonstrate this. Frankly, I don't care if you believe in it or not. Our kids, at the end of the day, this is what we're saying as a school system, you have to do. You don't have to believe in it, but you do have to demonstrate this behavior. And if you do not, this is what's going to happen. So I think we need to move away from the belief conversation just a little bit to focus on the fact that we're holding people accountable for their actions and behavior. What they do in their head is on their own time.
But this is what I've been saying for 5 years when you all keep saying changing hearts and minds. We're not changing hearts and minds, but what we're not hearing, and I think Lynn's question is the same as mine, what is going to happen when that doesn't happen? And it's not happening. It's not happening in a lot of our schools. And yet I don't see anything that has changed because, as I said, these standards, I mean, we've been requiring this now for some time, in all honesty. The anti-racist audit, as Lynn said, only confirmed what we already knew. And so we're sort of still at the same point, and that's what I want to hear. What is going to actually be different? I mean, if there's no accountability for implementing or changing something, that's the part we got to hear. What's the accountability for this?
And I think that's a really, I mean, and you're right. And I don't think there's no accountability. I do think that accountability happens. I think we have a framework for what happens when an employee does not abide by our code of conduct and by the expectations that are outlined. It's about that consistency. And one of the things that we did hear from our leaders and our supervisors, and this kind of gets to the second part of Margie's data, is that our leaders, especially when it comes to dealing with issues of equity, do not necessarily feel equipped to be able to address it consistently. And most of the professional learning that we've been doing as a result of the audit for our leaders in both central services and in the school levels is, what does that look like? And how do you create the conditions and hold people accountable in order to do that? What do those conversations look like? How do you tackle those difficult conversations? And I think that's the nuance, is making sure that that's consistently happening everywhere with that accountability. But you are correct.
But it also has to happen with the leadership. And that's questionable too in my mind. The accountability for the leadership has to be there before it can be passed down in the school. So they have to have some sort of belief that there's got to be this standard in my school. And that is what, in all frankness, that I'm not seeing. All right, but we're going to let you move on because, we,
We could talk about this all day.
yeah, we'll be stuck here because we're always stuck at this point. But go ahead.
All right, so I'm going to just finish up with two more impact statements, and then I'll pass it over to you, back to you, Shauna Kay. So I just want to talk a little bit about those school leaders you were talking about. So they have participated in 20 hours now between last year and this year so far, and we've done some work with them to learn that they've needed some support, and they on how to talk about, how to create those conditions to talk about race, culture, racism, and bias in their schools. And so that's what we've been focusing on this year. And we've seen some changes. We have our final session with them in May. What we've learned is they needed help on really talking. We've focused on bite-sized feedback and how they observe, how they set up those observations, and then how of both instruction and of planning sessions, and then how they give feedback after they've done those observations. So they've shared, just this last session we had right before spring break, they shared specific strategies they've worked with changing teacher practice and how it's gone. Next, when they come back in May, they're going to bring the data that shows how did that change impact students. So that's where we are with school leaders. And then with central service leaders, to the point that was just mentioned, we've been working with the central service leaders, including SEIU leaders, and they've received 20 hours of professional learning between some of last year, this time, and then this year. By the end of this year, it will be 20 hours. And we've had them do assessments. So we're actually we did pre-assessment, we've taught them some things, and then we've given them some assessments to do throughout this learning. And we can see now that 72% of our leaders can effectively and consistently name racism, which is an increase of 26% from when we first started. Now they can name it. We can also see that they can identify for themselves what policy and practice needs to be changed and how they would change it. Where we still see where we need to work is how they are leading others to change policy and practice. So we will continue with that professional learning through the end of this year and through next year, and helping them be able to lead others to do the work.
And when we say policy, we're not talking about changing board policy. We're using that term a little bit more loosely. Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, small p policy is what we say.
That's an interesting way that you're handling it for SEIU. I wonder why it's not being handled that way for the school leaders also, because you're able to get a better feel for what it is they can name and what it is they plan to do about it if you're constantly.
Yes, we have some formative assessment, and we will have those impact reports by the end of May where you'll be able to see that. The school leaders, we focused on. We've done the piece around naming racism also. We've focused on the instructional leadership component has been really strong for our school leaders, leading them to observe instruction, give feedback on instruction and planning, and help teachers shift practice. So less about the policies there and more about instructional practice for the school leaders.
Well, where is welcomeness in there? Because if the student doesn't feel welcome in the school or in the classroom, the instruction is just a waste of time.
You're a perfect lead-in for me to turn it over to Shauna Kay, because remember that core component that we're talking about here is school and classroom environment, which being welcoming is, is a condition that we set in there. So how does that principal or the school leader observe a teacher, make sure they're being welcoming, and coach that teacher to make sure they have that practice down pat for all the students in their classroom?
Shebra has a question, and then Lynn.
So I was going to ask the question, so what are we doing, or are our paraeducators included in this number? And then what are we doing for long-term subs or substitutes that come into the classroom, right? Some on a regular basis. It may not be consistent every day for 2 weeks, but enough so that they should have this type of training as well. Anybody that's in the front of the classroom before our students should have some type of training around this, because just all comes full circle when we don't.
Such a great point. Unfortunately, the budget didn't allow for paraeducators to be included in these district-wide days, but we have made it so that staff development teachers can work with the paraeducators on, in their schools, but they have to they have to carve out the time to be able to provide that for the paraeducators and the long-term subs. What we're creating for teachers is not. It can be used for everybody. The budget is a little bit tight to be able to have them on these days.
Yes. So can we come back with a plan as to how we can implement paraeducators and substitutes? Because that's a priority. I mean, because they work very closely with our students, right?
It's something that we think about. Yes.
The substitute is, I just know, putting my principal hat on, I think some of the biggest issues I would have when it would come to situations where students did not feel that they were in a positive environment were when I had a lot of subs in the building. So building their capacity is critical. And I think that's an area that we have not done as well in.
Yep. Thank you. Yep, we must do that.
Lynn, I'm sorry, were you finished?
No, I was done. I just want to say
Lynn.
that.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Ms. Sharon, because I think one of the things that some of our really powerful teacher advocates and student advocates have been saying is let them help create training modules for paraeducators, for substitute teachers that can help address the issues that you're mentioning around creating an anti-bias system, what it looks like to be an LI and an upstander. That's the student's perspective. And then from the teacher perspective, simple online trainings for them to see what's it like in a classroom, especially a specialized classroom. So I think that's something that we should seriously think about operationalizing. If we're saying it's budget constraints that are getting in the way of this, creating a simple online module that can then be shared might be a lower cost efficient way to try to get around some of the concerns. But I'm going back and I'm looking at the information on slide 8. Maybe you're going to get back to this in more depth, and maybe Mr. Yates is going to be talking about this. But so when we say that after, at this point, after all of the district-wide trainings that have happened with school leaders, we see 72% of elementary schools, 68% of secondary schools have begun to create conditions to talk about race, culture, racism, and bias. So I'm not really sure what those conditions would be, and my math is very rudimentary here, but 138 elementary schools, 65 secondary schools. So to me, we're looking at 39 elementary schools and 21 secondary schools that have not started to do that. And so do we have schools that have not started this work? And what are we doing about that?
We do have schools that needed some extra support to do that work, and we work as a team, so we share this data then with their directors, and we work with the LASs and the staff development teachers and the principals there on helping them to be able to start that work, to get that work moving. And then that whole accountability piece is key, but that's the importance of working together with OSI and OSSWB together for the schools that needed some support to start this work.
What does that mean, needed extra support to start the work? You told them to start it. What does that mean?
And can the data correlate back to what's happening in terms of discipline and suspensions, attendance to those schools that aren't participating? Like, it just shouldn't even be an option.
What does
Well, it's not that they don't want to, but they need more knowledge and skills. They need to build their knowledge and skills to be able to do the work. So they need support from key leaders that we have here today who are going to share some of that to know how to do it. It's not that they don't want to, it's that they need the tools on how to.
Sure, and I wasn't making the assumption they didn't want to, but so what I will say is I'm looking at Ms. Duranby. She's one person.
Yeah.
And so are we understaffed and under capacity in that sense to be able to spread ourselves to all the schools that need the different supports? Because I'm going to guess that somebody who needs the support has called in the central office and say, hey, I need help. And then we're like, yeah, well, we don't have that we're not available because Mr. Amby is over here at this school. Is that what it is? I mean, what is?
In some instances, it could be, and I'll pass it over to Shauna Kay in a second. I mean, I think that's where we all have to work together, right? We have to use the LASs, we have to use the curriculum office team, learning and achievement specialists, yes, who work with all the staff development teachers, and we have to work together with the directors in OSSWB, and we have to work with Shauna Kay. It has to be a team effort. That's that piece around coherence and alignment, why that becomes so key.
I'm still having difficulty understanding the needing extra support. They went to the same, everybody started out with the same training, right? I guess I'm missing it. You're saying that it's not that they don't want to do the work. I understand. Well, put it this way. I hear you. I'm not sure that I understand that, but I hear you. What exactly does that mean, needed extra support?
So I won't speak.
Are they larger schools that have?
I won't speak for Margie, but this is the way I think about it, being in several different schools in MCPS. Each one is its own ecosystem. So without naming school names, I've been at a school before where you had a higher degree or a higher number of teachers who had more, I would say, skills or expertise or even more positive pro-social beliefs, and that translates. So they could have the same training as another school who may have a different kind of environment, maybe less experienced teachers, maybe teachers with some resistant beliefs within the culture, and it has an impact. So both sets of those people can go to the identical training and receive the identical information, and the practice and how it's implemented and the degree to which it's received, implemented, etc., is different. And if you think about that times 211 schools, every time you walk into one, that variability, just like kids in the classroom, exists amongst the adults. And so that's going to have an impact on how that training is received. And so when we talk about schools that receive more support, I won't talk about it from Margie's lens, but from my lens, like looking at schools in the restorative evaluation. So there are 20 schools that are reactive. It's not that they didn't get the same training or the same rubric or the same criteria. It's just that their implementation might be to a lesser degree because of a number of factors.
Accountability, though, that gets us back to the accountability. That's where I'm having my difficulty, because we've been saying this now year after year.
And I was going to say, that's what we need and want to hear, right? And I know that it feels uneasy to say the hard stuff, that some might need additional support because there might be a little pushback. That's okay. We need to hear it. But we also need to know when it comes budget time. This is what I know. I know that it's hard to sit here and say, we're going to reduce and we don't need, but we actually really do. So if it would be helpful for us to know, we have this many learning achievement specialists who have had to be deployed in this way, right? So whereas we thought we needed 9 or 3 per director, we actually need 6 because we're trying to do this work. And if we do it the way we know it needs to be done, it's just going to require more people. And then we just can't worry about the budget and the numbers. We just got to put forward what we know we need to be able to do this work and push it forward. So I see Dr. Moran here.
Wait, I see Lynn's hand up first. Go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah, well, I do, Mr. Amby, I really do appreciate you just really naming it, because when you have people in a school, again, gets back to, we've got 25,000 employees, they all bring what they bring. So when you've got a school with more people in it that have very resistant beliefs, and we have people out there who do have they're very resistant to creating a truly equitable system for a variety of reasons. So naming that, and that just gets to, I mean, you mentioned it too, when we talk about restorative justice, we still have 20 what we call reactive schools. And I would guess, and I'm not asking you, well, maybe you should, I'm guessing that those 20 schools that are reactive are also among the schools that have not yet created the conditions to have these conversations. And these are hard conversations to have. They're important and they are enriching, and they will make they will create better environments and climates for everybody, but they are hard to have. And so what we're doing, and I'm guessing that's why Dr. Moran is here, is talking about how we are supporting particularly leaders in schools with more resistant staff members, and how you get around setting those expectations and holding them accountable, as Ms. Wolf is really focusing on here. How are we holding schools accountable? And you said it, Ms. Sharon, well, whatever's going on in their head is going on in their head, but these are expectations that we expect to see in their professional work in the buildings. And so how we're holding them accountable is really, really important, since, again, we have 20 reactive schools. We have a bunch of schools where the conditions are not yet ready for them to start having these conversations.
So, Dr. Moran, go ahead.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Sorry, I was like kind of coming down, going back up, coming down.
All right.
Good to be here with you this morning. So the first thing that I would say, and I apologize if it was said, is that the under the 10 principal standards, standard 3 is focused entirely on equity and cultural responsiveness. And I think it's important for me to highlight this, because I think this is something that we need to have a discussion about. Our principals are held accountable for that standard. Some of them, like Mr. Yates, are highly effective in that standard. Others are effective with areas of growth. Some are ineffective and are right now in the process of receiving additional support from the director and others. There isn't a teacher standard that matches the principal standard. So I just want to put that out there out of respect for our principals. They're being held accountable for very specific criteria under equity and cultural responsiveness, and that's what the standard is called. We don't have a matching standard under our professional growth system. There are school systems in the state that have those matching standards. So you're being provided as a principal that you can refer directly to language and hold them accountable. We utilize standard 1, but it doesn't really call out specifically anti-racism, equity, cultural responsiveness in that standard. It's around commitment to students. So I just want to highlight that as an important, as we're holding principals accountable, just something that a barrier that they have to work through out of the PGS. The other thing I just wanted to share is that recently, and we talked about the schools that need additional support. There is the theory and application of the professional learning. There are people that are very theoretically advanced, but when it comes to applying the skills and seeing them in an instructional program, you're not going to see them the same way. Our directors and associates have just completed nearly all 211 schools going out, and part of that was going through and doing instructional walkthroughs to look at things through an anti-racist lens. There are schools that are in very different places of applying instructional strategies that have been outlined in the professional learning that Stephanie and her team has delivered. We've collected that data and honed in on some schools where we are providing additional support. And the additional support I want to say too is where you have resistant staffs, as Ms. Harris said, a lot of times you need another voice coming in with a different perspective to support the principal in messaging some of those things. And I think a lot of it refers back to our core values as a school system. It's not really something that's up for negotiation. It's what we do, it's who we are. And people need to either get on board with that or not get on board with that and find something else to do, because it's who we are. And I think the thing that we are working on as central office around the accountability piece is this idea that anti-racism lives over here, equity lives in this department, and over here is the instructional leadership and accountability piece. All of us have to be knowledgeable and be able to do the work that you referred to as Ms. Jornaby. All of us have to be able to do that work. So the central office professional learning is equally as important as that schools are receiving. It's not work in isolation. It's merged together, and we need to see that work when we go out and visit these classrooms in action at the ground level, applied and not in theory.
Thank you for that discussion. It's interesting to find out that the teachers don't have a matching standard. Is there any work that that's being done around that?
They are. I know that they're in the process of doing an RFP. I don't know when that's happening to revise the teacher PGS, because it is 20 years old-ish, around 20 years old. And I will say, while it's not a match for match on the 10 standards, there is bullets underneath standard 1, which is commitment to all students, that does specifically focus on equity. But it, like you said, it's not a one-to-one match.
Well, thank you. We're going to move on so we can get through the rest of this.
Sure, and I'll be as quick as I can. Next slide, please. So going back to that, we are focusing on the engagement strand of the 3 areas that equal good school climate: engagement, safety, and environment. And one of those strands includes relationships. So it's famously said that people do not care about how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's holds especially true for students. And thinking back, for me, it's the value of Miss Rice teaching me the electric slide in 2nd grade as a newcomer to this country. Still not coordinated, but still remember it. It's Miss Johnson's special lunchtime lunch bunches where we would read Anne of Green Gables. And it's Miss Jones coming to our neighborhood playground, showing up where we lived, and helping me fix my hair for our 6th grade graduation. It's in the academics, too. It's in Miss Green's dramatic plays instead of traditional assessments to assess what we knew. And it's in Mr. Ishmael forcing me to take as rigorous course load as I can simply by being in his AP Lit class. I wanted to come to school every single day. I did. I was that student. And I wanted it in large part because of the relationships and the care that I had from my teachers. And you can see today, when I grew up, I still want to come to school. As a principal, I saw that reflect outside of myself often with teachers like Miss Chichester, who's Teacher of the Year from Sligo Middle School, Miss Shane, Miss Parks, and so many others that cultivate that for our children. It's more than a feeling. It impacts life outcomes. Our school worked to be intentional about those relationships and how we engage students. And many, like me, came back when they left. They would say, "Can I volunteer? Can I earn SSL hours here? Can you still help me?" Right? Effective restorative justice work, effective restorative approaches are 80 to 90% proactive. It is centered in relationships, self-care, and to a minor degree, conflict mitigation. A relationship cannot be repaired, though, that never existed. You can't repair something if it didn't exist. So this year, our efforts continue to support building relationships, but a little bit more intentionally. Most of our teacher education programs do have a deep focus on building relationships with students. We talked about it a little bit. How do you greet students in the door? How are students reflected in the images and the curriculum that they see? How is it culturally and linguistically available to students? So 2 areas we realized we need to work on was, 1, our staff really need to work on understanding students' trauma and its impact. There is a lot of questions about why students do what they do, and while we understand that we are to build relationships, we don't understand always the trauma that sometimes impacts student actions. So that was one area that we needed to work on. The second one is something that we call emotional or behavioral regulation. You'll hear the social workers maybe mention emotional dysregulation that we're seeing with a lot of our younger kids post-COVID. So those are 2 areas that we really keyed in on. And so we upped our game in a couple of ways. We partnered with the Office of Special Education and with the Office of Counseling Services on increasing access to a program called Zones of Regulation, which helps our students, particularly our younger students, identify when they are not quite regulated or what zone of regulation they may be in to develop strategies to adapt to move into a different zone. We worked on building capacity through helping staff understand ACEs, which are adverse childhood experiences, which do speak to some of the traumas that our students experience. So our RJ specialists and some of our other specialists are certified trainers through Treehouse. We also worked on increasing cultural proficiency in some of our smaller spaces, more focused on marginalized communities. So we have our stipended RJ coaches who have a PLC who, instead of just the practices and strategies that they work on in school, they've been given a little bit more in terms of training from groups that speak about their experiences and how it impacts students. We're working closely with the University of Maryland, their Center for Restorative Change, in specific contracted peer mediation trainings and services to expand that out next year with the kids, right? Student-led. And we are also, like many of our districts, we've engaged with MSDE's new trainings and modules on bullying and harassment, as well as more on-site support at schools. You'll hear a little bit about that when we talk about suspensions, about what on-site support from schools look like from our specialists and social workers. And then this summer, one of the things that we're exploring, this is not fully inked yet, and you'll hear from Principal Yates about how his school has piloted this, is the Commerce Schools pilot. Several of our social workers and RJ specialists, several of our coaches have taken this training and brought it back to their schools, but we need to continue to evaluate like what is the impact that it's having on schools that have participated in it and how we can expand it. And I know that some of Mr. Yates' content is around that as a school pilot.
Well, that's a lot of different programs. How are you evaluating the effectiveness of all of this, not including the summer 2024 one, which, you know, is just getting started, but what about the rest of them? How are you evaluating the effectiveness of them?
So centered on, hold on one second.
Do you want water?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Centered on, and I'm sorry, I'm working on something.
You need water? Here.
Yes.
Here's one right here.
Absolutely.
This one.
I just got released from the hospital yesterday.
Okay, why don't you take a break?
You okay?
Yeah, I'm going
Take a
to.
break.
Take your time.
Yep. Need to leave.
We're going to flip over to the chronic absenteeism.
Okay, give her a break. Give her a break.
For a moment, recess.
Give her a break.
Yep. I think
We can recess for 5 minutes, okay, and give her a break.
Yep.
Okay?
Hi.
You have to talk.
Would you like to continue?
Yes, absolutely. Good morning, everyone. My name is Carla Lopez Arias. I am the Supervisor of Behavioral Health. And if we can go on to the next slide, and I'll continue on for Ms. Joranby. So one of the things that we have been working within the restorative justice units is making sure that we are evaluating the effectiveness of the practices at the school level. So last year, we embarked on a process to evaluate how restorative our school communities are in order to intentionally plan to support schools. We were proud to find that most of our schools had begun the work of incorporating core elements of proactive restorative approaches in their school communities. The district is providing more direct support as we have been able to peel and really look at the rubrics for each individual school. The development of restorative community action plans for the 20 reactive schools were identified as part of the annual review that we had that we had last year. One of the things that we do with the reactive schools is we do quarterly planning meetings where this instructional specialist assigned to the schools meet with the school team, the restorative justice coach, along with the principal, assistant principal, staff development teacher. So it is a team at the school level that works on implementing the practices. And it is about reviewing what are those areas within their school practices that need to be elevated. In some cases, it is about the incorporation of daily community circles as part of community building. In some cases, it is looking at how am I getting referrals from students and really digging through that data and examining for disproportionality, for things that may be preventative rather than proactive at the end. So really looking at how can I get supports for specific grade levels. We have spent a lot of time this year in elementary schools looking at grade levels that either the principal or assistant principal had contacted to do some walkthroughs, to do some observations, and provide some supports on practices or interventions that they could be doing to be preventative for students that will work for all of them. So that's one of the things that we do also at the quarterly reviews with the 20 identified schools. As of right now, we are currently looking at or having schools complete this year's evaluation. So looking at how did they do last year, what were some of the practices that they had in place, and what are some of those practices that they have added so they can also be captured in the rubric that they're completing. Or I think our due date, or tentative due date, is for the middle of April, and then we will have the data to share with the board in May. So you'll be able to see the breakdown along with the memo as to what does the data tell us.
So then we also, so thank you for that. So then in having that information, we'll also be able to see how they've been able maybe to reduce some disparities that they've been able to see in the past. Okay, yeah, very good. Okay, that'll be helpful.
Great. Next slide, please. We are also continuing to differentiate our training and support based upon the suspension data that we have. Some of that is looking at some of the things that we have put in place this year when it comes to suspensions is looking at suspensions weekly. So we do a weekly report looking at, how schools are doing, what does that suspension look like when it comes to specific targeted groups that we are, target at the school level, at the county level. We share that data in monthly meetings with our directors from the Office of School Support and Wellbeing. We have specific schools that have been identified in the as part of having this proportionality that are working through a grant that is in collaboration with special education. So one of those things that we do within those 23 schools is also have quarterly review meetings, looking at what are the goals to reduce this proportionality when it comes to suspensions and discipline at the school level, and what are the supports that we can provide in cross-office collaboration with special education, with our Office of Wellbeing, as to what can we implement? What are some of those preventative measures that we need to put in place? At those meetings, we have, again, there's the school team, which is comprised of the great resource counselor representing the counseling department. We have our social workers that we have in place. We have a restorative justice specialist that services the area, which sometimes in case there also is a focus school for them. We also have the supervisor for special education, and if the school has the SES program, then we also invite the supervisor, which is Sandy Ives, to be part of those meetings so we can have a comprehensive discussion as to what do we have in place, where do we see our suspensions or discipline data being impacted, and how can we support through all of our offices the work that the school is doing at the forefront. And as I said, we do have our specialists assigned to 8 of those focus schools to be on site twice a week. And they work in making sure that the restorative practices are implemented at the forefront. That is not only a reactive. When we think of usually restorative practices, we think of the reactive pieces that come into play, but we need to make sure that we're putting them at the front of our work. Next slide, please.
I have a question, a request. Can I get information on which schools are seeing the largest decrease in suspensions and whether or not that decrease correlates with anything else other than restorative justice? Does it correlate with attendance or something like that? Thank you.
And I can tell you, just from following the data on a weekly basis, that a lot of the schools that have seen the decrease in suspensions is that they are working within the grant of making sure that they are reducing disproportionality. And a lot of these things that are putting at the forefront is what you're going to hear Mr. Yates talk about, making sure that we have the supports for mental health, for well-being, and restorative practices that are part of the core of the work. But yes, I can get you the list of that.
I would really like to know if there's something else that impacts it also. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
And so I was going to piggyback off Ms. Wolf. I think, too, what I'm looking for is to see what are we doing different? Like, is the response different? Are the relationships really cultivated? How long has that coach been at that school? Because we did put a lot more coaches to see if it's a new coach having an impact, or is it because a coach has been there for a number of years and been able to do the work and put in the work? So all that information, that detail will help too when we come back to have a deeper discussion. Thank you.
Next slide, please.
It's actually one back.
Oh.
You want to go one back? Go back to slide 12, please.
I was like, where am I? Thank you. So, what does this look like when we look at our numbers? Setting goals was our next step. We are using the data and results from our work to make decisions for the next year. We know that setting strong goals will definitely support the work that the schools are doing, and we will see the impact in the outcomes that we receive, that our students are feeling, safe and welcome in our environments, that we know that they are preventative measures at the forefront before discipline comes into play, and we know how to use restorative practices to mitigate some of those things as well. So if you notice within our data, we know that as Shauna Kay has said in the past, we do have our social workers that service middle schools. We have a set of them that work 2 days a week at 2 different schools. And then we also have restorative justice specialists that also serve at their focus school 2 days a week. When we looked at the discipline data for those for the middle school set of schools that are serviced either by a social worker or a restorative justice specialist, we have seen a 30% decrease of Black African American suspensions at those schools.
This 35% decrease, can we also identify what the behavior was that led to the suspension?
Yes,
thanks.
Definitely. And we, also looking at the other target that we are racing after is looking at the schools that we have been working on for the last year and a half on lowering their disproportionality and suspensions that are part of the grant. And then we also have seen a decrease within the suspension data for Black African American students, a 35% decrease, which is huge when it comes to doing the work at the work.
It is huge, and the reason that I asked for the behavior is because, as you know, we get a lot of emails, and the question always is, are we reducing what we are dealing out as a suspension to make our numbers look better, basically. So that's what I'm trying to figure out, what we were doing and what we're doing now that's different, to really see if there is a change and whether or not we can scale that up to other schools that aren't having as much success, maybe.
I think one of our biggest efforts last year, right? So I said in this table last year with Steve talking about suspensions and also looking at, where was the state of that? And in that presentation, we noticed that our data had a significant amount of suspensions for disrespect and disruption, right? Very subjective codes. So that has decreased significantly because part of the work that we wanted to do with our principals, with our school leaders, is to make them aware of the subjectivity within those codes.
Right.
And really looking and targeting at the codes that are not suspendable for out-of-school suspension to make sure that they were not being used.
Yeah,
So a lot of our decrease is occurring within or cleaning up part of the area that we needed to do.
I remember having a discussion. Ms. Harris, go ahead.
Thank you. Just two quick questions. So I do really appreciate where Ms. Wolf is going here, because we also have been hearing a lot from principals and community about concerns about incidents happening in schools, and do principals have the support they need to address them effectively. And so I think we need to be really, really careful to look at different, two different things here, because I don't think, disproportionality, and we do want to make sure that we are getting to the root cause of that and we are correcting that. Because we should not ever see disproportionate outcomes when it comes to student discipline issues. But also, and I don't think Dr. Moran is still there anymore, but maybe later we can talk about how the messaging that went out to principals before spring break and that is going out to community today around how we're sort of focusing around the expectations of student conduct is in consult or in concert with and is not in conflict, I guess, with the work to reduce disproportionalities, because it should all be seamlessly working together. Because if the school discipline process is working appropriately and expectations are clear and everyone is held accountable to them, we should not see disproportionality anywhere. And then, so that's one thing. And then I did hear you mention a specific mention around our SES systems, but I wasn't really clear why. If that is because more of our reactive schools have SES programs, or there are heightened concerns around our students in those programs being, the recipient of disproportionate, student discipline outcomes.
I'll clarify that for you. So within the 23 schools that we have identified through the state of Maryland that are disproportionate for Montgomery County Public Schools, some of them have SES programs within those buildings. So when we meet with those schools quarterly, one of the teams that come along for those meetings is the SES program, to make sure that we are also looking at how is the program working within the school, what are some of those proactive measures that they're putting in place for discipline, how are they supporting the social emotional well-being of their students, and whether that program or the students in the program are receiving some of the exclusionary discipline that we need to make sure that we are talking around programming in itself, right? Because we know that the profile for a student in that program is going to be emotionally dysregulation. So how is the IEP aligning with what the school team is doing, and what other things we can put in place and brainstorm as a team within multiple offices to continue to support the student with the goals identified in the IEP.
Thank you. I think we can carry on. I think we can go on.
Okay.
I think we can go on.
Next slide, please, and I think it's for you.
So good morning again. Steve Neff, Director of Pupil Personnel and Attendance Services. Thank you for having me. When we talk about engagement and conditions, we ask ourselves the question why some of our students aren't coming to school and why some of our parents aren't sending their children to school. In our focus groups with students and caregivers, and this is corroborated by research, it suggests that there are many reasons, but they tend to fall, one more slide please, they tend to fall into three relatively broad categories. There are students or families who feel like they can't go to school because they have to work, they have to support their families by watching younger siblings, they have chronic medical or mental health conditions, or they're experiencing housing instability. We have students and families who won't go to school because of bullying concerns, safety concerns, or they feel embarrassed when they're in school. And then we have a group of students who make a regular choice not to go to school on a regular basis, either because they don't feel seen or valued there, or they don't see the value in attending. So as been mentioned, we have created a variety of structures that are designed to be proactive and preventative to address many of these barriers to student attendance. Since an August press conference, we have provided regular proactive community communications around the importance of attendance and engagement. We have also partnered with agencies like Identity to share this messaging with targeted audiences. We created an attendance monitoring and interventions operations guide to build the capacity of staff and school teams to engage in the continuum of promotion, outreach, collaborative problem solving, and targeted interventions as they relate to student attendance. This summer, we will conduct enhanced professional development for our student well-being teams to reduce the variability in implementation across all of our schools and to ensure that structured interventions are documented in our Synergy MTSS platform. We will be using the Synergy Student Information Remind app to revamp the method and the language in which we proactively communicate attendance concerns with families. Beginning with the fourth quarter, we will be notifying families at certain absence thresholds during the quarter. We're also being very mindful of the tone and language in these communications. Previous communications have been less supportive with language like, these absences are above the norm and could seriously impact your child's academic performance. Our new messaging coming through Remind texts and emails will be culturally competent, informative, empathetic, and offering support with language such as, we stand ready to help if you are experiencing any barriers to your child's attendance. I'm extremely excited to share the development and launch of an attendance data dashboard launched on March 14th. And the next slide, please, so I can share some of the features of the dashboard. The dashboard allows us to view chronic absenteeism data at the district level and across schools. The school page will display data down to the individual student level. We will be able to filter chronically absent rates by school type, grade level, race, gender, emergent multilingual learners, students with IEP or 504 plans, students receiving farms, and newcomers. Data is refreshed nightly and is pulled directly from the Synergy attendance data. And if at any point in the meeting you would like to have the dashboard previewed for you, we have that available. Yes.
Is this data available to the public? Not all of it.
These data are internal data for school staff.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Sorry, I did not clarify that. You can go to the next slide, please. So these are some data that were pulled from the new dashboard and were current as of Wednesday, March 6th. At that time, our chronic absenteeism rate was 2.21% below where we were as a district on the same day of school last year. And when I've presented data in the past, people have correctly asked, how does this compare to where we were last year? This data does that. So I mentioned that this is real-time data, so I'm happy to report that when I looked at the data right before spring break on March 22nd, the overall chronic absenteeism rate had dropped to 3.38% from where it was last school year. As we dig deeper into the data, we see that we have made the most gains with our youngest learners and are continuing to see challenges in our older learners, especially at the high school level. All of our ethnic and service groups have similar patterns of decreased chronic absenteeism rates. Next slide, please. These graphs reflect for MCPS what is seen nationally. It's a U-shaped pattern of chronic absenteeism rates as we move from our pre-K students all the way to our seniors. Again, these data show that we have been making the most gains with our youngest learners and still have the most work to do with our older learners, again, especially our high school students. We regularly look at our trend data to catch patterns early and implement interventions to reverse them. Next slide, please. So as these data show, even with our promotional, proactive, and preventative efforts, we still have students who are chronically absent. We use real-time attendance efforts to both focus on our interventions and our schools in need of additional support. We are closely monitoring real-time data on an almost daily basis. We have a variety of ways that we share these data with our central services partners. We share data in monthly meetings with our principal supervisor directors and in school support team meetings, sharing the lens of attendance data for the schools being discussed. Sharing data monthly with Deputy's leadership team in an effort to identify district-wide needs for interventions and creative resolutions. Individual school teams monitor their attendance data on a bi-monthly basis, and it's all made all the easier with the new attendance data dashboard. They can look at quantitative data to identify student groups which are less engaged and spend time conducting outreach to their cusp students or students who are hovering just above or at the chronic absenteeism rate of 10%. They also solicit qualitative data from students and caregivers to learn the reasons for that disengagement. The student well-being teams continue to address individual student and family concerns addressed through root cause analysis and targeted interventions. And formal interventions are documented in the MTSS Synergy platform. The key message here is that we can only learn the why behind a student's lack of attendance if we have built a relationship with the student and the family. I know that in these presentations, board members are always looking in what we describe, what it actually looks like at the school level. So I'm very pleased to turn this over to Kevin Yates, principal at Damascus High School, to discuss how much of what we have discussed thus far is implemented at his school. Mr. Yates?
Before you do that, can I ask you one quick question?
Sure.
You talked about a number of things that impact students coming to school, and you talked about identity being supportive and helping you get your word out. But I didn't hear, unless I missed it, relationships with other agencies that we might need to be in contact with, such as, HHS or Child Protective Services or anything like that. Where is that in here?
So I failed to mention that, but we do have partnerships. I sit on two different boards that involve HHS and Child Protective Services, the local care team, and the Truancy Review Board. We also have connections with national colleagues. Attendance Works, we have a contract with. We have been benchmarking with other agencies like Everyday Labs and things like that. So we are connecting with our agency partners, both locally and nationally, to try to spread the message, including through our community messaging, trying to get it out through our networks for parents that speak other languages. Thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. It's good to see you. I think it's interesting, 5 years ago today, I was a principal intern right down the street at Julius West with Craig Staten, and Dr. Moran was my director, and he pulled me in his office one day and he said, I could see you as a high school principal. And I said, no, Peter, really. I'm here at Julius West, I'm gonna be a middle school principal. And he said, no, really. I see you as a high school principal. So I just wanna point that out, small world, 5 years ago. So 5 years ago, this coming May, I was tapped to become the acting principal at Damascus. And at that time, Damascus was going through a lot. And my job was to try to rebuild relationships and trust. And I know I heard relationships earlier. So I'm happy to report, I feel like we've done that. So we're in a really good spot. Damascus is in a good spot, and I'm here to talk about that today. Next slide. So what are we celebrating? First of all, we're celebrating that we've reduced the disproportionality in suspensions as well as suspensions overall. before I move forward, I think it's important to note we have not eliminated suspensions, and sometimes there are time and place for suspensions, so I think that's worth noting. What we've done is we've taken a careful look at the code of conduct, and we've revamped our process. So whereas, in the past, somewhere at some school, it might have been, the student did this, let's just suspend, here we go, boom, 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 write up the letter, send it. What we've done is we've really revamped that process. We've incorporated our RITSE, Resource Teacher Special Ed, our social worker, and our admin team. And we've created a Google Sheet of major incidents that we keep, at our school. And anytime there's a major incident, we type it into our Google Sheet. So it's a new row, date, student name, student ethnicity, whether the student has an IEP or not, and then what is the actual infraction we're talking about, and then the details, and then the consequence, and then the administrator name. And we've done that since I've been at Damascus, and that's super helpful because, number one, we're weeding out our implicit bias. So if you have something against that kid, we're checking that because we're going back and we're looking at the Google Sheet. What did we do for the previous incident? Didn't happen this year? No problem. Let's go to last year. Didn't happen there? Let's go back 2 years. We can do that. And that's been a game changer. But back to the process, consulting with the social worker or the resource teacher special ed and saying, here's what I'm thinking, what are you thinking? Am I off base here? Let's get the whole team together before we make a hasty decision, because we have the time usually to make that decision, usually. And then finally, the use of restorative justice assignments in lieu of a suspension. I can think of a time, I can think a lot of times where a suspension is not going to teach the lesson that I need the student to understand and learn. I need the student to understand the impact of his or her actions on the staff or the students that were impacted. And by sending that student home for a day, that might be a day spent on PlayStation or social media or doing whatever, and that's not going to get the impact, the desired impact that I need, which is I need you to come and re-enter our building and be ready to learn and repair those relationships that may have been broken. As a school, we've been a leader in MCPS in analyzing the anti-racist audit, which couples so well with this work of reducing disproportionality in suspensions and also increasing attendance, because let's face it, why are some kids not coming to school? It's because they don't feel welcome, they don't feel that relationship. So with that, 2 years ago, we focused on unconditional positive regard. So, while everybody's been presenting, I keep thinking like, hey, we did that. So 2 years ago, every staff member had to, it was a year ago, every staff member had to focus on every day is a new day. We have unconditional positive regard for every single student. Even if that student really got at you yesterday, it's a new day. And then secondly, every classroom teacher created a classroom compact together with the students, which you don't always see in high school. You're used to seeing that more in elementary and sometimes middle. This year, we focused on equity-centered, trauma-informed educational strategies. And we've coupled with the Commerce Schools. We were part of that pilot. And so we've done trainings with our staff during our monthly rolling staff meetings on the Commerce Schools strategies. We did an exercise, real life examples from Damascus, where teachers got a tier 1 behavior, a tier 2 behavior, and a tier 3 behavior, and they read it in groups, and they read the teacher's response, and obviously names are taken out, and then they commented, okay, so what did you think about that? Could that have been handled differently? Could that have been handled in a different way? We have all of our staff give a first quarter and a third quarter survey to their students, anonymous, and that provides them with real-time data. It's not the end of the year, it's the end of the third quarter. It's right now. And I'm thinking, I need to send a reminder to my staff because we need our teachers to take that data and say, okay, it's a new quarter starting next Thursday. What do I need to do differently to reach all my learners? Because we need to make sure every single student feels welcome in every classroom. And it's important to note, when we talk about attendance, we have our weekly SWABOT, Student Wellbeing Team meetings, where we're looking at these students who have the chronic absenteeism. What are we doing? Have we tried a home visit? What else can we try? And do we need to, put some parameters around the return? And if you don't return by this date, we will withdraw you. And sometimes that actually motivates a student. So, and then finally, the monthly PPW admin counselor meetings, where we divide up the students by the alphabet. And the PPW says, okay, here are the really hard cases that I'm dealing with. Where are we? What strategies do we have?
One quick question.
Sure.
How are you doing the anonymous student survey quarterly?
Google.
How is it being anonymous? That's what
It's a Google form, and we make sure that the part which says I'm collecting your email address, you take that out. Because otherwise, if they're collecting the email address, you're not going to get real feedback.
Okay, that's what I was just trying to figure this out, because we're always trying to figure out how we could get information for more people anonymous.
Next slide. This is Damascus High School, and I think it's important to point out because a lot of people are surprised by our demographics. They've been changing. I think when I arrived at Damascus, we had a little above 20% Hispanic student population. We're now at 30%. So it's a constantly changing student body, and I'm always making our staff aware of that, because sometimes, as in many MCPS high schools, you see the staff demographics don't shift as quickly as the student demographics. So I want our staff to know who's sitting in front of you. Before we move to the next slide, I think it's important to point out, and I apologize I didn't, a lot of this has to do with the framing on the part of the leadership. So when I got to Damascus that first summer, I led a pre-service training with my PE resource teacher, Steve Pizarski, shout out, and it was focused on the CPI nonviolent intervention training that all administrators and many staff take on quit taking it personally, Q-tip, and drop the rope. And our students, many of our students are coming to us with trauma, and this is before COVID happened. Now after COVID, it's especially true. And we as staff, we have to try really hard to not take it personally. It's not, even if a student is cursing you out, it's probably not about you. It's about something that's going on in that student's life that we can't control. And this summer, when we kicked off pre-service week, I read a letter to my staff that I was given by a student named Michael last spring. And it said, Mr. Yates, I want to thank you. You believed in me when other schools gave up, and because of you, I graduated. And I was like, and I read that to my staff, and I said, that's what I need from every one of you. I need you to be a champion. And then I played Steph Curry's movie. It's on Apple TV. And there's a part in the movie where Steph Curry graduates. And he says, and I want to thank one person in particular because he believed in me. He never gave up on any points at his coach. And I played that clip 1 minute long for my staff. 1 hour, 45 minutes to 1 hour, 46 minutes. And I said, folks, you are that coach. Every single one of you, you are that champion for students, for all of our students, every single one. And I think that I come back to that point during staff meetings because I need my staff to understand we all have our biases, our baggage that we're bringing every day, but we have to leave that in the car. You get in the school building, we have to be there for every single one of these students. No matter what, and even if they're having a rough day, we have to show them we care about you and we're about changing lives and we're about providing that opportunity. So just needed to say that at one point. Next slide. So what were our lessons learned? So from the audit, we learned that our Black and African American students and parents do not feel as accepted as other groups, and we go back to the relationships, they did not feel that they were as likely to have a trusted adult. That's where we get at those student surveys, first quarter, third quarter. Our Hispanic students have a strong community, which positively impacted their wellness data. If you look at their wellness data, it's like through the roof. Unfortunately, the academic data in that group is not as high as the wellness data, so we're working on that. Our under 2.0 GPA, we created a list to be monitored by administrators, and we looked at the ethnicity of our major incidents that I talked about earlier with that Google sheet. We found that half of those major incidents were of our students who are African American. 59% of those students are chronically absent, and then 55% of those students are below a 2.0 GPA. So that tells us these are students who need TLC. These are students who need partnership, mentorship, careful monitoring and interventions. We also looked at our hallway walkers. So come to a high school, you'll see some hallway walkers, right? So last year we created a Google form for our security and administrators to fill out who's in the hallway. What's the name, if you know it? What's the ethnicity? And we found that 63% of our hallway walkers were African American. And if you look at the previous slide on African American demographics, I won't quiz you, but it was 13% African American.
Did it match up to your Google document that you created?
Many of the hallway walkers were in the Google document, absolutely. We pulled our staff development teacher, who's also our RJ coach, Miss Morabi, shout out, pulled those students one-on-one and said, talk to me. You know, you're not in trouble. I'm not assigning you lunch detention, but why are you walking? And the students reported, I'm bored, I need a break. And that, well, why aren't you walking during this class? Well, that teacher really holds me accountable. And so it's like, okay, so that's something we shared with our staff. And then each administrator last year and this year had a student focus group where we pulled grade levels. I had 12th grade, and our students communicated they need a more engaging class time and less teacher talk. So that's something that we're bringing back to ILT, and we're creating a walkthrough tool to go through and say, okay, this is something we need to work on. How are we doing with that?
So did I understand you to say that while you're seeing a lot of improvement, you're not quite seeing the academic performance improvement that you need to see yet?
That's correct. Not yet. We are seeing improvement in wellness. Right.
So
Yep,
I just
absolutely.
wanted to be sure I understood that.
Next slide. So what did we do? I spoke about some of this a little bit ago, talking about Ms. Wolf's question about academics. We're utilizing the student learning outcomes that all teachers are responsible for to target those students who are not successful right now academically, but also incorporating the teacher relationship, the student relationship, because that's, somebody said it earlier, you can't learn if you don't have a relationship. Celebrating Latino students and their community, but then also incorporating their academics into our SIP goals and our SLO. We implemented the small groups with the school social worker and our RJ coach, which has helped prevent fights. So we're catching fights before they're happening. I mean, right before the break, we were running around. I was running around, and that happened to be the same day as the supervisory visit from my director. I was meaty and, hey, let's not fight. Let's talk. So we're finding that our relationship building with our social worker, our RJ coach, and our administrators and counselors has help to de-escalate before it gets to the fight. So that's been, the social worker has been a huge addition, as well as the RJ coach. We recently implemented an ILT-led hallway intervention plan where all ILT members signed up for different periods of the day to walk the halls. And again, we're not trying to get people in trouble. We're just trying to deter the walking and help get you back to class. And sometimes ILT members were reporting, well, that student was out without a pass. I walked him back and the teacher said, oh, sorry, I didn't give him a pass. I'll write him a pass.
I was going to ask you, so did you use, so the students that did the survey and they talked about, well, I stayed in this class because this teacher held me accountable. Were they hallway monitors? Did you ever have them in the hallway to kind of see what the response would be from the students walking around the hall?
Let me see if I understand that. So to help the staff who don't hold kids accountable, or the staff who do?
No, to just help the students that are walking the halls. Or so are they not a part of the ILT? I'm making the assumption that
So the ILT members, the resource teachers, are escorting those students back to class.
Back to class,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. And that helped a lot. Just having increased staff presence in the hallways is a big help.
Can I ask you another question? And I know we're running short on time. How did the staff take it hearing the responses back from the students saying, well, I stayed with Mr. Yates because he held me accountable versus Mrs. Evans, who just...
So we didn't use names, but we did provide staff who got positive feedback, say, hey, Miss Evans, you've done a great job. Johnny said you hold him accountable, so thank you.
So you just shared it, but you didn't say
Exactly.
Okay.
I think this is true of all schools. Our staff respond really well when they hear feedback from our students directly. So we've had our Minority Scholars Program students share with our staff, this is how we are feeling, and it's a tremendous impact.
That's right, I forgot, because they got the information themselves.
Exactly.
So yes, that's right,
Yep.
okay.
And finally, most recently, we're planning teacher learning around the co-teaching model and differentiation to incorporate and increase student engagement. Sorry. Next slide. This is our behavior intervention chart, and this is really, really helpful because it prevents a lot of, I'm sending you to the office because you looked at me funny. I'm sending you to the office because you talked out. Well, let's refer to the chart here that the ILT created, right? And that we went over during pre-service, and you see the minor offenses, and then you see the redirection given by teachers. So this chart is a huge help because it was collaborative, and because it helps staff understand we're following the code of conduct, we're following restorative justice practices, and we're trying to keep students in your room so you can learn. Obviously, if a student throws a desk or beats someone up in a classroom, it's a different story. But when we're talking about minor offenses, our goal is really to repair that relationship, return the student to the classroom as soon as possible. Next slide.
One more question.
Yeah.
So are we able, I know that the question was asked at the Communication Stakeholder Engagement Committee meeting like a couple of years ago, but since COVID, have we been able to get the cluster principals back together to kind of share best practices, to be able to talk and just kind of share what's going on, what's happening in the cluster? Are we?
Yeah, absolutely. We do. Well, I think it's up to cluster, but our cluster meets monthly.
Okay.
Our principals,
okay.
yeah.
I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Next slide. So let's celebrate. These are, you see on your left there is the major incidents, 21, 22, 22, 23, and 23, 24. And sorry, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we're looking at roughly, so 21, 22, if you remember, that's when we came back from COVID. Wow, that was hopping. Things were popping, like fights, lunch. So that's probably looking at like 88 to 90. Last year, we were able to decrease our major incidents down to 49. And these are anything from like smoking or showing up drunk at a football game, right? Or fight in the hallway, or throwing a chair during class. And then you look at this year, right now, we're sitting at about 29 to 30 major incidents. So I attribute that to all the steps we talked about on slide number whatever. And then you look at the suspensions, and it's almost the same trend, right? So currently we're sitting at 10 suspensions this school year. Next slide. And these are our out of suspensions for this year. So we still have the disproportionality. It is a low number, so it's hard to draw large conclusions from that, but we do have the disproportionality of African American students represented in that data. Somebody, I think it was Ms. Wolf, asked earlier, are teachers given, or maybe it was Ms. Harris, I can't remember, are principals given the latitude to suspend when it's necessary? And I can answer that question, yes. I had Sean McGee earlier, and now Sean's been promoted to an acting role, and now I have Dr. Yolanda Allen. And what I do is I reach out and I say, hey, this is what happened, I'm recommending this, and the director says, yes, I agree, or hey, Kevin, can you knock that down from 3 to 1? I think that is more appropriate. Next slide. All right, now Steve Neff's shop. Thank you, Steve, for this data that we're looking at, which shows, if you start at the bottom, that's 2021, and then you go up, it's 21, 22, and then you go up, it's 22, 23, and then this year, we're sitting at a chronic absenteeism rate of 26.98. So it's not nearly where we want to be, but we're moving in the right direction.
So I have a question. Go back to the last slide. And you mentioned, Mr. Yates, that sometimes like you might call to say, this is what I'm thinking about. So I'm going to make the assumption that you're not always around when the incident happens, right? So sometimes you might be going off of the judgment of someone else. How do you take that in consideration?
Absolutely.
Are you going back to that sheet and saying, okay?
Yep, that just happened a couple weeks ago, right, before spring break. And administrator in the building handled the situation. She was actually collaborating with Dr. Allen and looped me in because I was at some meeting, and then we talked it through together. Actually, I was at the Commerce Schools training, that's where I was. And we talked it through together, and we decided on the one-day suspension. So, I'm always looped in, and because we have that Google sheet, we're in the same document together. Also, my administrators, when something happens, they create a timeline immediately. This is what happened, boom, 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 and then it's in Google. So I'm jumping in and I'm looking at the timeline in real time. We share it with our director as well so that everybody can get in. And also with Dr. Jones, Natasha Jones, in case it is a 10 and E, we'll ask her, hey, this is what we have. Here's the timeline. What do you think? Does this warrant a 10 and E?
Okay.
Next slide. And then next slide. So we talked earlier about what we do with attendance, and we do a lot. It's still not enough, but it's a step in the right direction. I think it's important to point out here the home visits. They've been extremely helpful in touching base. Sometimes it's a language barrier, and the student is telling the parent who doesn't speak English, hey, it's okay. They say, I don't need to go to school. I only need to go when I want. And so us coming to the house and saying, that's actually not true. Your child needs to be in school every day. That happens.
That's very interesting, because one of my questions was, how are you engaging the community in this discussion about attendance?
Yeah, and the home visits are very non-confrontational, supportive stance. We're here to help. Our goal is to get your child back in the building.
Okay.
We also had at our PTSA, our back to school night in September, we had a meeting for an hour before the PTSA meeting for our Hispanic-speaking parents. And we had our PCC there, and we walked them through how to sign into Synergy and look at your student's student view account, parent view, so that you can actually see the grades, because sometimes students block their parents. So, yeah. Yeah. Next slide. So, as you can see, we do a lot in terms of trying to make sure we're utilizing every single method available to us. It's still not enough. I don't know if you all saw today's The Daily podcast from the New York Times. It's on chronic absenteeism. I listened to it on the way down today. I was like, hey, this is perfect timing. So I recommend it. That's it for me.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I don't have any further questions. Lynn, I can't see you. Did you have any questions?
I did, and I am very interested to learn more about the Calmer Schools pilot, and maybe we can get more information about that later, because I know we are tight on time. But the Calmer Schools pilot and how many schools we have participating in that, since Mr. Yates has mentioned that as something that's very helpful.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I don't know when we'll be able to have you before it's like this again, but you're retiring, so.
I know. You'll still get my wife. You still get my wife. And my daughter's 5th grade teacher at Olney.
Yeah, hate to see you go. Yep.
I'll look forward to seeing you in Olney. I see him quite often. All right, well, I think that's it. I don't see any further lights on, so I want to thank you all. I know this was a tough discussion. I still have a lot of questions. I'm sure a lot of people do, but I look forward to our future discussions to get some of those answered. So thank you. We're adjourned.